Hi, welcome to Art Talk. I'm your host, Jim Tripp, in the spirit of art. Today we have an excellent show for you about the lost wax process, casting and foundry work. We have footage of the Renaissance-Foundry in Bridgeport, Connecticut. And our host, well, our guest isn't here just yet. I think he got tied up in traffic, but hopefully he'll join us soon. So we're going to see some footage from the foundry, pouring of the bronze and wax molding and all kinds of casting methods. But with us today, right now, is Sharon Griffis, director of the Griffis Art Center. How you doing, Sharon?
Very good. Nice to be here, Jim. Usually I get to be in the back room and watching the production of Art Talk, but under the emergencies I get to sit out here and experience what our guests go through. But I don't mind so much since I did a lot of the shooting at the foundry and have been able to walk through it a number of times. And I'm hoping to fill in while we're talking and looking at the footage with questions that the average person might ask about what we're going to see. Because even though I've been through different foundries for maybe 5 or 6 times now, it always amazes me what goes on there, the number of people working on it, each of them an artist in and of themselves, the noise especially, which is outrageous. We'll keep the volume low on that today. And just watching the pieces go from one stage to the next. Not only the creation, but the restoration work that goes on in a foundry.
It is amazing, the artists behind the artists, how many there are, and so many different processes. But hopefully we can get into them. I think we missed a couple on the shoot, but we'll try to go into that after we see the footage.
A couple of what?
A couple of the processes of the mold making.
Well, that's true. I think we shot maybe 8 of the processes to go from a piece of clay or plastiline into a final stage when an artist can take it home. But there must be, what, about 15 different stages and people that have to handle it?
At least.
Especially the space-age look in the actual foundry. But this isn't typical of all foundries, correct?
Correct. This is more so. Certain foundries just do sand casting and simpler methods.
Okay,
this
so
is very
this is
intricate.
The most elaborate type of casting, dating back to, I think when I read some literature, the
centuries.
5th century,
yes.
15th century, sometime
Fine
back in there.
arts, yeah.
Always the way it's done.
When they used to pour the gold. The Incas, that was a very similar process. We're going to take a trip down to the foundry now.
Okay, and this is Cavalier Renaissance Foundry right in Bridgeport, Connecticut.
Bridgeport, Connecticut.
With a history from the Italian era, right?
Yes.
Okay, well, let's take a look at it and we'll walk our customers and clients and viewers through what we're seeing.
Okay.
Now, I remember shooting this. This was just the office.
Yes.
Because the foundry itself is pretty archaic looking, but in order to do the business of art, you have to have computers and all the normal modern day technology to keep track of things.
This is a big business.
I'll let you, as an artist and a sculptor, start talking on these.
That's a plastiline piece you see up there, clay, so to speak. And you're looking at different molds, and right now this is just a scan. I believe we're entering the wax room. And this is where the pieces are just brought in and set up. It's very hard to see, but that's a huge mold right there. It's a vulcanized rubber mold. And the black is rubber and the white is plaster on the outside, but they pour the wax into these molds. And then as the wax cools, from the outside in, there's the wax melting. They pour it back out, so you have a hollow shell of wax. Okay, there's the workers working on the wax. See those square bars? It looks like
right
those
in the
are
front, yes.
Yes, those are pieces of wax, gates, they call them.
Now, this is not household wax.
No. It's beeswax, though.
Okay. It must be very pure to work with.
Very pure. And it's different colors and different textures. We have hard and soft waxes.
Now, the artist works on the wax as well as these workers in the foundry for details.
Yes, these are artists also. And right now he's preparing a wax. They're putting a large piece together. That's just a very small piece.
And we'll see this large piece that they're trying to reassemble. It's an abstract and it's very complicated.
Yeah, it's a major puzzle.
Unlike realism, which is rather self-explanatory.
Let's see.
And that
But
wax is
he's
hard.
hollowing it. You see,
Okay.
he's taking the edges off, and that piece is actually hollow.
Mm-hmm.
If you had solid bronze, it would just be so heavy, you couldn't lift it. Plus, it would crack in the cooling process.
Okay, so these waxes are made hollow the way the bronze is going to be. What does that wax feel like? Is it soft? Is it hard? He's working with
sticky,
tools.
soft and sticky. Well, so like I said, some of the waxes are hard, but when they repair these waxes, because after they're out of the molds, they have to be reassembled and repaired, and they use a softer wax for that. Much easier to work with.
And what's he doing now?
Now he's melting. He just hollowed out. He just took the cap off there, and that will be reassembled into another piece. And it has to be hollow in order for the bronze to pour correctly.
So that's just melting it and smoothing out the edges so
Yes,
they're not rough.
the
Because
inner edge.
exactly what you have in wax is what you'll get in bronze.
Exactly.
Okay.
That's why the lost wax process. That's why it's so important.
Oh, lost wax. We're going to lose the wax, as we'll see a little bit later
Right.
on. Okay.
Wax
That makes
disappears.
sense.
There's a number of people working in this wax room. The amount of work that goes through this foundry is incredible.
I know that's an artist piece of work in the foreground, which is those odd hunks. You can't tell exactly what's going on.
Yes,
And then,
that's for an installation in Maine.
okay.
These people come from everywhere, the islands, South America, you name it. They come from all over to this foundry.
And that's the artist keeping an eye on the work.
Yes.
Now
Yes,
that's,
the artists touch up their own work also.
okay. Now the two pieces in the background are bird knockers, I believe.
Yeah, bird knockers.
We'll see them repeatedly. It's something where they're making, I think, 100 of these small pieces. But when you're casting, there's no easy way to do it. You just have to work on every single one. It's not multiple casts.
An incredible amount of time goes into each piece. And just the number of hands that touch each piece before it's finished is, well, most people don't know.
She's working with what looks like a dentist tool.
Yes, small wax tools. Some of them are dentist tools.
So she heats it up in the flame and touches up little tiny details.
Right, melts and smooths, and some pockets get caught in the wax and you have to fill them up, things like that. And then they also put the gates on the wax. They're large, they look like hoses that come off these pieces. They attach them in every so often in every, so many inches.
Out of wax?
Out of wax, yes.
Okay.
So when
It's
it's
like
poured,
a tube of wax.
just
It's
like-
called a gate.
yeah,
It's put on it. Okay.
tubes. We'll see that farther on also when they're dipping in porcelain.
Now this is that total abstract piece. We saw her working on one section of
Yeah,
it.
quite a puzzle.
Yes, I remember when we were shooting this that they had a photograph and they were trying to reassemble it from the photograph.
Right, before they actually go to the pour, this will be broken into a number of pieces before it's actually poured in the bronze.
About how many pieces do you think?
Oh, geez.
50? Could it be as many as 50 separate sections?
Yes, it could be.
Okay.
Yes, it could be. Each one of those is a piece, basically. Because the molds, the size of the molds and what they can pour at a given time, the crucibles of bronze, it's important. And then they're welded back together.
Well, I think we
Raised.
need to talk a little bit later on about how a piece of clay, an artist may, let's say, create a sculpture of a horse, but when it goes into the foundry, it gets literally taken apart in the clay stage
Yes, it gets taken apart
in pieces to make the wax.
to
and
make the
molds.
mold, right? First the mold. And from the molds, that's where they pour the wax.
So when you're talking about reassembling, that's because it came apart and you have to put it all back together again.
Yes.
Okay.
And as the process goes through, you're supposed to work your piece more and more, so it gets better.
Okay.
Now there's a mold going together. It's plaster shell on the outside, and he's clamping, it's two halves, so clamping them together. And the inside is rubber, and it's hollow.
Okay.
So that's the negative of the
And
piece.
he actually pours wax inside of this container now.
Yes, they have big vats of wax all over, and they have it at a certain temperature, and they just pour it in. Let it cool a little while, and then pour it back out, so it's hollow.
But it creates the image.
Yes.
They're just not solid wax, but
No.
the image is inside. So you have your plaster on the outside, then a rubber mold, and then your wax.
Yes, if you look at the rubber mold, it's the exact opposite of the piece.
Mm-hmm.
It's a negative.
Reverse images.
And look at this. What a puzzle. There's so many different steps and tools used. The amount of tools are astronomical. They have so many tools in this place, between grinders and welders and brazers.
And if you look carefully, there are actually people in that sculpture, which you couldn't notice before in its abstracted form.
It's hard to see also because the wax is so dull. You know, it's a dark red wax they're using.
But it comes in different colors as well. I've seen it also in a brown and
browns and lighter reds.
immense detail. And it's the responsibility of the foundry.
You know, not putting that metal is not attached or inside that wax. They're just using that. They have to go through all that work just to set the piece up again and work it.
So it's like a grid that they're laying this three-dimensional piece against to make sure you've got the right perspective. And that was just the wax room in the back, showing some of the pieces in final stages.
All the pieces, all kinds of pieces. They do abstract and modern, realism. You can see all the pieces with their arms cut off and disassembled.
Yes, that is not the actual sculpture. These are pieces in progress.
Right. Some of them are like that, but yeah, they're just. But see, all the arms are in a different shelf, and they're cast separately.
So now I think we take a quick look at the furnaces that they're firing up.
Yes, so warming up the ovens.
There was an hour or two to wait before they're up to temperature. This is how it was done hundreds of years ago. We'll see a little bit later.
It's a little easier now because they have gas and certain things like that. But
they don't have to put wood to keep the fire
see
going.
the green flame shooting out? That's the bronze is melting and melting it down in a crucible.
Oh, the green is just the chemical burn off.
Yeah, that's the kind of the color the bronze gives off.
We're going to see them pour some molten bronze into some molds a little bit later on.
Look at that. Look at the heat.
Do you know the temperature they have to get that up to, by any chance?
15,000. I'm not exactly sure. It can't be too hot, and it can't be too cold.
It has to be perfect.
It has to be perfect, yes.
Now that's a piece of wax that was in the foreground.
This is where they dip the pieces in a slurry. They actually put a shell around them. Now you can see those are all pieces, those are all wax pieces, and you can see the tubes coming out of them.
The gates, those are all gates?
Yes, okay. All those are wax tubes. That's all wax in there still. And they're dipped into this big vat, the slurry mix, a number of times.
I think slurry is an apropos name for the color and
Look at
texture.
that, yeah, look at the color. And that's a mix of silica and other things that coat the piece.
All right, so there's a piece of wax.
Right.
And they're going to coat this now. And they do it several times.
Right. First they put, this is a very loose mix they're using now. So it fills in all the pores and every detail of the piece.
What exactly is slurry for? Why are they doing this stage?
This puts the shell over the wax and it hardens. When it hardens, it's a silica-based type of slurry. And the bronze doesn't melt through it. It's like a porcelain. But this loose coat goes on, and then they dip it into a heavier mix. And each one has to sit and dry, or hang and dry after every dip.
So when they pour the bronze in, after what we saw with the plaster and the rubber mold, there's actually a space between the rubber mold and the wax of this slurry?
No, there's no more rubber mold. The molds are all done now.
Okay.
We're done with the molds. This is actually the piece they're going to pour straight into that.
Okay.
But first the wax is melted out. I believe you have some footage of that. It's slowly melted out, so actually you have just the shell.
Okay, just this slurry mixture with this silicone.
And it's hard, see?
That's just sand, a fine mixture of sand.
Sand and silicone. Depends on the piece, but several times.
Nothing's automated here. It's all people handling every stage of it.
Very slow process.
And I know
They do it very fast.
And the foundry people are explaining to me that each one of them have almost their grandmother's recipes for each stage, that they like to do their own special mixtures of things.
Yeah, they're all specialists. And they all work within each other's area and realm. They all know all of
each other's jobs.
Yes.
This is just a perusal of more areas of the foundry. And the noise volume is just incredible because there's always machines going everywhere.
Dust, machines, flames. You really have to watch yourself everywhere you walk. The forklifts running through.
And these are all actually pieces in progress. An artist was working on one of them.
You see the big piece, no arm. You see a hand sticking up in the back.
It's a little disquieting to see body parts all over this place, everywhere hanging, leaning.
People's heads.
Now what is this section?
Now this is where they make the rubber molds. There's a little out of sequence, but he's marking the numbers on the mold right now. We didn't actually capture them making the molds and putting, working.
It's one of the steps they missed. They weren't working
Yes,
on that.
very important step, but at that time they were doing something else. They're finishing them up, basically.
So they have to track each piece, each section for each piece of artwork.
Right. With a big piece of horse there.
With a hoof. Not too neat an area, I would say. And when they're working, huge clouds of plaster seem to be rising up into the air
See,
everywhere.
there's a piece being cut up into pieces. Fairly intricate piece. He's a master mold maker. Exactly what he's doing. And each piece, see, if he makes a wrong mold, the piece is ruined.
The artist would literally have to start over again.
Yes, you have to make that piece over or rework it. That just doesn't happen usually.
So those rods and tape are not part of the artist's work. This is the mold maker working on it.
Right, he's there just holding it up, support.
This is the part an artist must not be able to stand, seeing their artwork carved up.
Carved up, cut up.
Pieces.
There's a rubber molding inside.
Okay. It looks thick there. Is it thick?
No, the rubber's only half inch, not even.
Okay. But they keep it in the plaster to keep its shape?
Yes.
Protect it?
So it doesn't warp.
Okay.
And a number of pieces can be poured, a number of waxes can be poured through this vulcanized rubber before they'd have to remold it.
Now here's the slurry again with the gates.
Okay, that's hard now.
Okay.
It's rock hard. And what they're doing there is they have a slow flame on it and they're melting out the wax. And see those tubes? Those tubes are there so when they pour the bronze, the air can escape. So the bronze goes right to the bottom and the air shoots out the sides.
Okay.
Otherwise it would freeze the bronze in pockets. You would have big holes.
What are those things?
Those are just other pieces, or pieces of pieces
Waiting to be...
poured.
Okay. Oh, and this shows the wax melting out.
Right. They stick a steel rod up in there and it just heats up and the wax melts out.
And that's just a big torch, heating it up,
Yeah.
emptying it out.
Slow flame. Here we are. This is getting ready to pour. Bronze ingots.
I was surprised to find out that bronze actually looks like gold before it's
It does,
worked.
doesn't it?
It's bright, bright gold. It's not the patina that we see usually.
It looks just like gold, actually. Beautiful.
So these are the slurry pieces again, and the wax has been melted out.
Right. You see how they're hollow now.
Right. And they're different color, aren't they?
Well, they're lighter.
From the temperature.
Yeah.
Well, didn't they heat them up in he's taking
Right.
them out of something.
They bake them.
Okay. To make them harder, or
To make, I believe, it might harden. It also gets all the wax out, finishes
to
off.
be sure it's all out? Okay. So that's a big furnace thing. We saw flames coming out of it
Right.
earlier.
That's what they were doing, cooking.
All right, so the bronze must be the right temperature now. They're getting this ready, and the sand is just holding them up in place
Right.
for them to pour. I think what surprised me is how accurate, when you see them take the bronze out and what it looks like, and they pour it right into the cups here.
Just straight in.
Straight in.
Molten metal.
A lot of people can't pour wine out of the bottle and be as accurate as they are.
You'd think there'd be some high-tech process to do this with, and it's just not. Here they are shoveling sand against, holding
Again,
the pieces.
labor intensive to
Yes.
get these pieces done. Lost wax method, investment casting, you get an idea of why it is.
Yeah, an investment, yes. Man hours, mega man hours.
And it's not really easy work when you think of the noise, the dirt, the heat. When they open the top of that, what would you call it, a furnace?
Yes.
It was incredible, the heat. I thought for sure the
Blast
film would
furnace.
even melt. It just became so hot there.
Yeah, it's too bad you can't feel it through the screen. Kind of curls the hair on you.
Just think about 90 degrees temperature hitting you in the face rapidly.
Yeah, thousands of degrees. Even he had to hold his hand up. It's like, wow, couldn't even look at it.
Yeah,
He has a mask on.
a lot of protective gear. Because this stuff just burns through everything.
Yeah, anything it would touch burns through.
Now, this is a container with molten bronze. And it doesn't have to be bronze.
No, it doesn't have to be bronze. It could be mixes of different metals or all kinds of metals.
Sterling.
Yeah.
That is as hot as it looks. Now, the interesting part here again, this is the expertise of these two men. We couldn't tell the difference just looking at it, but they know just, it seems by looking at it, whether the temperature is right or not. They stir it up a little, throw a little more in the pot. The chefs of bronze.
Yes. Now they're going to take the temperature of this first. Well, first they clean off the top. You'll see them stick a bronze bar in there, and they'll take the slag off the top. It's like the imperfections of metal or dirt that were in the bronze float to the top. They'll scoop it out. It is just like they're cooking.
Yes. Now, if you've ever picked up a piece of artwork made out of bronze, you realize the weight. So that's an incredible amount of weight, and that's why they're hooking up these pulleys and things.
Watch, he's just touching in there and cleaning that out. You see, it was still molten on the end.
I wonder how many little mixing spoons like that they go through.
He's taking the temperature right now.
As we're watching, we could also see that cooling a little bit.
Yeah, you actually do see it cool. It's white, almost white in the center.
Still not happy with the temperature yet.
They have huge chain hoists everywhere.
So
Everything's
just
so heavy.
the weight. In forklifts, I noticed a lot
And you
of.
can't get too close.
And we were a good, what would you say, 20 foot back from this,
Yeah.
feeling intense heat when we were filming. Now he just dropped something more in there.
A piece of bronze.
Regulate the temperature of the mix.
Yeah, cool it down a little faster.
More than likely that was for us to make sure that we can film it.
Right, right. It's very important, the temperature of the bronze. When they pour it, it has to keep moving. If it freezes, for any, say, a fine detailed piece, if it would freeze, it would ruin the whole piece. They'd have to go through all the steps over again.
Because it would just be too hard to get into the details.
Right.
Okay.
Well, it would just freeze and it
Watch
wouldn't go
this.
through.
Right in. Amazing. Well, pretty close.
That's it. Considering you can't even see through the masks they're wearing.
No. And the temperature. So every piece, step by step. So when you see these little tiny 2-inch pieces, they're done the exact same way, and they've got to aim and pour it right into the shell for that.
It's cooled down quite a bit there.
And that's the end of their pour.
They actually look at it. What you come out with. It does look like gold, doesn't it? It's beautiful.
Quite beautiful. How did they get that area off? The outside? The slurry, I mean,
Oh, you just bang it off.
Just hammer it away?
Yeah.
Okay,
chip it
because
off.
you already have the rubber molds and that preserves the piece.
But what we don't see is all those tubes of wax. They have to cut those and grind them off.
Okay. Well, this is what we're
Right.
looking at, finishing
No,
details?
this is just finishing details, but before there were big, huge chunks.
Knobs?
Yeah, it's black when it comes out. When they break it out, yeah, it's just black burnt metal with big chunks hanging off it. And it's amazing how they clean it right up. It's beautiful.
Now there's about 8 stations here with people working on that stage.
Yeah, this is the chasing. This is where they hammer it down, and all these little tools they use have textures in them. And they just remold and model.
So is he putting a texture on this?
And he's actually putting hair right back into the piece.
Okay. Because there might have been a little glob of bronze left or something like that, and they've got to finish it
Or
up.
a grind mark, something like that. And if there's a pocket, they braise more bronze into it. But they don't really want to do that because it's a they want a perfect pour.
That's just messy stuff left around. Now we're going to look at the last stage before an artist can take it back.
Patina.
Here's our bird knockers again.
Funny little guys.
But one is patinaed, the other is not. And I think a lot of people think that a patina is painted on, and we're going to see differently here.
Well, it's a type of painting, but you do it with a blowtorch
And acid.
and acid. Yeah.
Not like any painting I know of. But that's different from enameling on, let's say, an airtight piece of bronze.
Right. There are different methods of putting a patina on. Some people actually paint on bronze. But the correct way to do it is to use the torch and acids.
What I found interesting is that the patinas change over time as well. So what you may be looking at here may, in 6 weeks, look a little bit differently.
Right. Well, what you're doing with the torch is you're heating up the bronze. And when you put the acid on, it absorbs into the bronze and it speeds up the corroding process. Because naturally, if you left the bronze out in the open, as you see many statues, they turn green and brown, all different colors. Well, this just speeds up the process. And they add color pigment into it so it gets deep into the pores of the bronze.
Now, right now, that piece is steaming because he just heated it up.
Right, there's the blowtorch right there. It's a heavy-duty torch.
And it's got to be, again, a certain temperature that this worker just knows how hot it's got to be for the acid to take.
Yep.
And he also has to know what it's going to look like a little later,
Right.
not just when you're watching it being done.
Yes, because they do change. They change quite a bit.
So he's just cooling it down with water,
Yes, he's cooling it off.
taking a look at it.
Plus, when you put the water on, you can see what you have. It's more,
Well, because one of the stages we didn't shoot is when you put wax on after the patina,
darkens it right up.
right, which is what the water does, so it gives them an idea of what it's going to look at.
Plus, he's putting different colors in. He started off with a black and a green, and he's putting white in. I think we'll see him put white on.
So it amazed me that taking this blowtorch directly to a piece like that didn't harm it in any way.
Well, he's not using a cutting torch. That's a wide,
Flame.
very wide flame, just a heating torch. But it heats up fast.
So we're going to look at him actually putting on some white patina. This is a snowy white all.
Right. Great white.
Okay, there he goes.
There it goes. It goes on quite a bit whiter than it appears later. White is a very hard patina to keep that color. Because again, it's not a paint, that's actually an acid working right now. And it rubs off, as he works, it'll change tone and the powdery stuff will wash off a little bit.
Okay.
And whatever absorbed into the bronze stays.
Is it common for the artist to be there when they're doing the patina?
Yes, unless they're doing mass additions.
Okay.
Like the little bird knockers, there's hundreds of them going through.
But they would probably have an artist rendition of exactly what colors to put where.
Yes, and pictures. They do a lot of airtay work here. And they're very colorful pieces, very exact.
So these are the final scenes that we shot at the foundry. And all those bottles in the background, those are just different types of patinas and acids.
Yeah, all the little metal, little bronze pieces on the background.
Well, that was a fascinating look. It was fascinating shooting it there.
Right. Well, I'm sorry we missed that one stage of the mold making, because it's very important, but they just weren't doing it at the time.
Right. And they actually did a number of the steps for us to see while we were there that weren't necessarily
It was
in the
very nice of
process.
them to let us in
Yes.
to do that, because they were busy.
Very busy and dangerous.
Yeah.
It looked like they had maybe 100 pieces going at the same time.
Yeah,
They're backed
at
up.
least. More sometimes. Sometimes they're huge. They're 30-foot pieces and overlay, just massive pieces. And it's really interesting. Every time you go down, there's something different, and it's always going somewhere different.
And they also can take for the artist, let's say that you did a piece like the piece on the table here with the horse,
Right.
and they wanted to do that overlay. They'll do that for the artist.
Yes, they will enlarge. They can actually take a piece that doesn't look very good and make it better. And in many cases
And
they
we don't
do.
want to hear that. The artist has
No,
to do the perfect piece,
they
right?
are artists behind the artists. Well, we're going to have to take a short intermission right now,
Okay.
but we'll return.
And talk a
more.
little bit more about this.
Okay.
Okay.
Art is a process that fills our lives. See it, enjoy it. This public service announcement is brought to you by the Griffis Art Center, New London, Connecticut.
Welcome back. This is Art Talk. I'm your host, Jim Tripp. And we're talking about the Foundry. We just visited the Renaissance-Foundry in Bridgeport. And we're just going to talk a little bit more about what we saw. So Sharon, what intrigued you the most about the Foundry?
Well, the number of people working on a piece, and I found I was very sensitive to the noise levels. It's not a quiet place like you might have a painter's studio.
No.
There's, let's see, 8 grinders going, there was a forklift going, a slurry machine, 2 hammers hammering, torches going in one end. That was a separate room for the waxes.
Yeah, the pneumatic
Plus,
tools.
Pneumatic tools, and there were 3 radios going. I don't know how they can stand all that noise. And half of them had earphones on. And even as we were moving the camera around, we had to constantly move it because people were bustling so much. And every time I've been there, it's been like that.
Every time.
Every
Busy.
time. But it helped me understand why, if, let's say, an artist has commissioned a limited edition piece,
Right.
and a client wants to order one, they might have to wait a month or 2 before they get their piece back.
Right. They say 6 weeks for the basic, but you saw how many pieces are going through there, and it turns into 8 weeks, that type of thing. And there's so many steps, you can understand it.
And size doesn't necessarily make the difference. A little piece can take just as long as a life-size piece.
Right. Sometimes longer.
because of the details and the intricacy of chopping up all the pieces.
Very hard to work on.
Well, a little bird, let's say, with the wings stretched out, the wings get cut off, the feet get cut off, the body may be separate from the neck and the head and the beak, and whether it was 2 inches large or huge,
Right.
they have to do the same number of steps.
We didn't take any footage of them welding, actually, or brazing the bronze back together, but again, it's perfection, because they don't want to touch any of the detail, but they have to run that bead right through, and it's melting the bronze. So then they go over and they chase the piece again and reform it, say feathers, whatever, you name it, and perfectly.
And also the more detail an artist puts in, the more intricate little pieces. And I used to think that abstracts would be more difficult than realism. But the first time I saw a stag with the horns put on backwards from people who lived in the city, I realized that's not necessarily true.
They put them on right, but it's just, you know, if they don't have a picture to go by, they have to do what they think is best.
Now, I mentioned limited editions. Would you go into that a little bit more?
Limited editions. The smaller the edition, the better the investment for a piece.
So if you're investing in a piece of artwork, you want of bronze,
Yes,
you want to look for a limited edition.
yes, a small edition, because they break the molds after they're finished, and that's it. You have one of 5, 6, 10, whatever. Yeah.
So that keeps the value up, assuming that the value of the artwork went up. Again, always don't buy artwork for its value unless that's a different investment capacity. You want to buy it because you love it.
Exactly. And most people will not invest in a person, say they did their first edition. You know, they look at them and say, well, we'll wait till he has quite a few pieces of work, or he or she.
When you see magazine advertisements and you see, let's say, Remington advertised for $289 bronze, this is not a limited edition, correct?
No, those editions are wide open, and they just pour them like crazy, and the bronze isn't the pure. It's not the same.
Okay.
Okay, it's cheaper, basically.
Well, cheaper is okay if that's what you want.
Basically, what they did with those editions is, say Remington. He already had fame and fortune.
Right.
That was the family that reopened those editions, and they did it. And
So the artist had a limited edition to start with?
Yes.
Okay.
But when they're reopened like that, it doesn't actually hurt the limited editions. It makes them worth more at that point.
Well, I understand one of the ways to be aware of the limited edition original Remingtons is they didn't have bases on them. And a lot of the Remingtons coming out now have bases.
There's all certain works. They touched, say the tail was on just a certain way or this and that. And they don't do that after, because there's nobody following through those waxes. The artist isn't there anymore.
So an artist usually touches every single limited edition frequently.
Yes.
Versus these open ones, it's just mass-produced in some method. I seem to notice that the detail, yes, gets rounded and
because somebody's
softer.
not watching them and touching them. You know, the foundry can only go so far, and how do they know? You know, it's personal preference of the artist. It's interesting. You see a lot of women casting in bronze. You know, you look at the footage and you say,
why not?
but you look at the footage and you go, oh my God, you just don't expect to see women in there working away and pouring the bronze.
Working in the foundry itself?
Oh, foundry too. But actually, the artists also. A lot of women sculptors out there.
Do you think more than there used to be? Or
Well,
we're
that
just...
I don't know. I would assume so. Yes. But it's funny to see the women in there picking that bronze up and pouring it. And
well, it's incredibly heavy. I give them a lot of credit for that and dealing with it. And you usually have to wear old clothes because you're filthy, and it's incredible.
it's just the environment. Well, I enjoyed going down, and thank you for joining me.
It was my pleasure. I'm glad we have it on film so that we can show people and they'll understand a little bit better what we go through.
A little bit better. It's still very hard. I've been down there a number of times and involved in it, and there's still steps I don't understand. It's very involved.
Well, maybe you need to go down and work all the steps to
Yes,
understand better.
That's true.
Probably a good idea for almost every artist
Yeah.
involved in that.
I learned from the masters.
And they are all masters there, literally.
Yes, they are. Well, I think we're running out of time right now.
Okay.
I want to thank everybody for joining us on our talk. I'm your host, Jim Tripp. And Thank you, Sharon, for being my guest.
Thank you for having me on.
All right. Till next time.